This right here is my 12RU rack in my office. This is where both of my editing PCs are housed. The top system is a Threadripper Pro 3975WX and the bottom system is a 28-core Sapphire Rapids Xeon. Now, the thing is, quite often I talk about me doing things on the channel where I don't bother to make a video about it. What I decided to do is upgrade the 28-core Sapphire Rapids Xeon, and that's the system in the bottom of the rack. But to get started, we need to slide the system out of the rack. I also wanted to show you guys what it was like with setting up cameras and lighting and that kind of stuff when we're making videos, because I think you might find this interesting and gives you a bit of a behind the scenes look at what goes on. This is me climbing a ladder to put in the pole that we use for our overhead rig. We did a whole video about rebuilding our studio. There will be a link to that in the description, but this is something that I didn't show in that video because honestly, there was a lot that we did and I forgot that I had made this setup. Okay, let's open up the system and begin the extraction of the hardware. I'm going to try and do this in as real time as possible to give you a feeling of how long these things would usually take me. I'll pop the lid off the Silverstone RM52. We did a whole video about this case not too long ago. First of all, I need to take off this bracket. This is a GPU holder. Since I built this on the channel, I've changed the hardware. This has got a 3080 Ti. One of our editors uses Parsec into this machine when I'm not using it, and the NVIDIA card was just better for that task. Just going to unplug all of the cables from the motherboard, the USB Type-C, the USB front panel, all the front panel connectors, all of the millions of power connectors on this board. The idea is, while the 28-core Sapphire Rapids Xeon is a very good CPU and the system overall is very, very powerful, because I haven't used Threadripper 7000 for anything yet, I thought the best way to do this would be to swap out all of the hardware and build out a Threadripper 7000 editing PC. Board extraction time. We can finally get that motherboard out of the way. The interesting thing is, it's not because everybody dislikes ASUS right now that we're swapping this board out. The Gigabyte TRX50 Aero-D actually has a better feature set. Things like USB 4, which essentially is Thunderbolt 4, and I have some Thunderbolt devices that I wanted to use with my editing PC. As mentioned in the motherboard video that I did for this ASUS board, the last person who had this over-tightened the socket, and I wanted to show you how to do this properly without over-tightening it. Essentially, we're going to slide the 64-core Threadripper 7980X out. This is an absolute beast of a CPU. And I'm going to show you how to slot this in properly. Because the last person didn't bother to include the socket cover for this motherboard, I have to use the one from the Gigabyte board as well. So you slide that in and it makes a little click. And then you can kind of pop it down into the socket. And then retightening the socket is a 1, 2, and then a 3. What's more interesting is the tool that we're using comes with the CPU and has a torque setting so you don't over tighten the socket. Slide the 64-core Threadripper into the carrier. When it drops to the bottom, you hear a little bit of a clip. There's a few things you need to be careful with Threadripper, and mainly because there's a billion socket pins and you can bend them quite easily, so being careful is always good. Watch what happens with the included tool when we get to the correct torque setting. You can't tighten it anymore. You'll notice, again, there's a torque limit. And when you get to number 3 and tighten that one up as well, it does feel a bit tight, but you get to the torque setting. Let's get that ASUS board out of the way, and I wanted to show you guys what I was doing for storage. This is a brand new Team Group Z540 PCIe Gen 5 M.2 drive, and I've cloned my current installation for my editing PC to this drive. The thing I really like about these Gigabyte boards lately is there's no screws to mount any of the drives. It's all these spring-loaded clips. Obviously, we need to visit our friends at PeelCorp and then put the drive into the slot. And the other thing is, it's not just that heatsink that's spring-loaded. Again, visiting our friends at PeelCorp, putting the heatsink back into place and giving it a little clip. For memory, we've got 128 gigs of G.Skill Zeta R Neo. This is DDR5 RDIMM memory, and this is also ECC. This board only has 4 slots, and we have 4 memory modules, so it makes sense. It's so satisfying to click memory modules into place, especially when the boards have clips on both sides of the socket. I'll let you guys hear this one for yourselves. That's everything on the board, and we're ready to go with putting it into the RM52. The bonus with the Aero D is it's a really nice looking board, and it has all of the features that I want for an editing PC. It's not very often that I'll have a system laying down to install a motherboard, but for rack mount stuff, it's generally pretty easy. The technique I have is I put my finger in an Ethernet port and then I kind of maneuver it that way. Installation is the reverse of removal in this case with this motherboard. There's a whole bunch of screws, and what makes this easier is the fact that at this point, I haven't even decided on what cooler I was going to put in here just yet. This is such an easy case to build in as well. And if you're doing a rack mount system, I highly recommend it. It is on the premium side for pricing, but the build quality is phenomenal and the hardware compatibility is ridiculous. So yeah, I love the RM52. One of the best cases I've ever used. EPS power in. It's only got 2 EPS power connectors. Some other boards you need to use PCIe power as well. And that's the other thing I love about this board too, is there's less power connectors and it's really geared for things like video editors and people who want to build in regular size cases. So good work to Gigabyte for making a board that I thought initially that I wasn't going to like, but turns out it's very, very nice. Okay, this is the cooler I decided to go with. This is the Fantex Glacier 1 360 MPH. Now, I know what you're thinking. The cold plate is not quite big enough for a 64-core Threadripper, but after doing a bit of testing, it works just fine. And it's not blingy, it's not flashy. With these Threadripper CPUs, they still come with this Acertec adapter bracket, which makes it a lot easier for choosing a cooler. To mount this is the same as any other Acertec bracket. You just drop it in, rotate, and click. It's always good to check the orientation of your pump top before you install your cooler, so I would recommend doing that. This is something that I think is a little bit hacky, but this is the way that I decided to install this is whenever I install fans in a system that I'm going to be using for production, I'll use half of the fan screws just in case I need to swap out something very quickly. And all I'm doing here is using the radiator screws and mounting them through the vacant holes in the fans, and there's 6 screws that hold the whole radiator to the bracket. It's honestly the easiest way to do this if you're doing things quickly. You don't have to do it this way, but you know, it is what it is. We maneuver that back in and tighten it up and we're good to go. This is some thermal paste I've been raving about. It's called Scythe SCETE 2000 and it is very good and I've used it in a lot of systems. With this cooler, because it doesn't have a full cover cold plate, you'll need to apply the thermal paste directly into the center of the IHS. A little bit of extra thermal paste is okay. If you use too little, then you're going to have problems. There is a correct way to fasten Acertec brackets. It's in this pattern. There's 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Don't over tighten, mind you. Never forget to plug in the pump connector as well. Otherwise you'll be in a world of trouble. Let's install a GPU and I'll give you extra points if you can guess which GPU I'll be using, and it's not a 3080 Ti. For those at home playing, if you guessed the RTX 4090 Founders Edition, you were 1000% correct. Listen to how satisfying unclipping this is. One of the provisions I made with this build initially was I wasn't sure which GPU I was going to switch in or whether or not I was going to use multiple GPUs, so I did provision a 12-volt high power cable just in case I was going to go down that path. Plugging it in this case is easy and you don't have to worry about clearance at all, especially with that GPU bracket. The reason why this bracket should go back in with this case is it adds some additional support so the chassis doesn't twist at all because they can get quite heavy. If you're installing it in a rack that is against the wall, I would recommend just doing one side of the screws. It makes it a bit easier. Okay, let's put some of this gear away now because we're done filming. Well, we're done filming in here. One thing I always loved growing up was case badges for your CPU. It had to get a Threadripper case badge, even if it is a little bit broken. There's so many lights when we film these videos, it's kind of hard to explain that. But if you're not into video production or making videos, you might not know how much is going on behind the scenes. So I wanted to show you guys this because maybe you'll find it interesting. There is a lot going on here. And the top one off. I forgot that I used this side light. I don't know why it's still on. The other thing is, for some reason, I decided to close the door in the studio. I don't know why I did that. Doesn't make sense. It is so heavy. I need to be really careful. I've got a bad shoulder at the moment. All right, let's line it up with the rails and get it back into place. Listen to this satisfying sound when you push it all the way in. And there you have it, my 7980X 64-core Threadripper editing PC is ready for action. We're not done yet. We need to see if the system works. On our level 1 text KVM, we select input number 2 and then power up the system. We have to wait an excruciatingly long time for the memory training to complete, but with a little bit of luck, we'll be dropped into Windows. The thing that makes this all worth it is this entire video was edited and recorded on this brand new 7980X Threadripper 7000 workstation. I am so happy that I finally get to use this new Threadripper stuff. I've always had a love for over-the-top HEDT systems, and the Threadripper 7000 is no exception. While this video isn't sponsored by Rode, I did want to give them a shout out because they did send us a whole bunch of new Rode gear, and all of the audio that was captured in this video and all the voiceovers were recorded with and through road hardware. And I'll put a link to all of that stuff if you're interested in the description down below. I hope you enjoyed this very different build video. If you haven't subscribed yet, do that. And if you liked it, you know what to do. I'm your boy Nick with Gear Seekers. You peak, we seek. And we'll catch you next time.